Hi, I'm Heather Morgan, and I'm with Sales for Startups and Sales Folk doing an interview today with Mark Hunter from Sales Hunter. He has a popular blog, Sales Hunter. He's a sales consultant, and he has the book that you see in the background, High Profit Selling. Hi, Mark.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are.
Haha, thanks. So, my first question for you is how to effectively maximize profit.
Well, maximizing profit starts with maximizing the price. So what I'm going to say is, hey, we never want to be in a position where we're discounting price. And what I want people focusing on is what's the outcome? It's easy to get hung up talking about the features, even talking about the benefits. But what I like to say is, what's the value of the outcome? When I get the customer focused on the value of the outcome, we have the greatest ability to maximize our top line price, which of course is going to maximize our bottom line revenue. But you get to that by really asking good questions, because many times the customer doesn't even realize how much they can benefit from it. And I can tell them, but it doesn't count if I tell them. They have to tell me. So it really is the questions that I ask to get them explaining the outcome or the value of the outcome.
So, what are a few examples of some of those questions that you might ask?
Sure. A couple examples that I like to ask is, so what does this really mean to your company going forward by having this in place? Or, could you explain to me again how much you feel you will save by being able to put this into place? Or by getting them to talk about it. So the whole thing that I is in a B2B environment, I'm going to get them focused on really dollars and cents. And if I can do that, they can really begin to see, wow, by having this in place, I can attract this level of customer. And how much is that customer worth to you over a 2-year period, 5-year period? I see. So could you explain that to me again? So in other words, I get them talking about it.
And you probably think a lot more of like the economics of like lifetime value and
Right.
these things, which is really good because profit is really the underlying driver of whether or not your startup or company is successful or fails.
Right. And here's the thing to keep in mind. Nobody buys anything. They only invest. They only invest. So they will invest as much as is necessary to receive the level of return that they want to get. So if I can't sell the ROI, so to speak, I might sell the risk or I might sell the pain. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Hey, you need me to avoid this potential. And what would that risk be to you if you had to shut down for a couple days? Talking about that, not a problem at all.
That's a really good point. I like that the way you frame that. So, on the same lines of profit, what are some of the ways that you can find great customers that will really appreciate this value and make it easier to be profitable and maximize price?
Great question. And you know what I find too many times happening right now is people are engaging with too many customers. I find great customers by narrowing my list. And what I mean by this is that we will spend time with what we think are prospects, but they're nothing more than suspects. What I want to do is I'm going to validate you when you have demonstrated to me a piece of proprietary information, something that's not known publicly. B, you've demonstrated to me a time commitment as to when you're going to make a decision. And C, you validated to me that you're a decision maker. When you do those three things, I'm going to spend as much time as necessary to get that deal, to be able to close that sale. So what it means is really, I want to validate quickly to spend time with the fewer people to be able to spend better time with them.
Yeah, so a lot of the 80-20 rule, the Pareto rule, what have you, of weeding down to just focus on those core, big, and ideal customers. Okay. And so
Yeah.
that always makes sense, but I think for some people it's easier said than done. So, how would you recommend people get started with weeding down and narrowing and finding out who to focus on?
Yeah, well, you know what? You can start broad, start wide. And I like it when people start broad and wide because you never know who it is, because one of the interesting things about the business environment today is it's very possible that people will somewhat stalk you. They will stalk you for months. They may stalk you for years. This is why having that web presence becomes so critical. I want to have as big, broad a presence on the web, because what will happen is that they may follow you, and what they're doing is they're building a level of confidence in you. Because what I'm finding is that customers engage with salespeople later in the sales cycle. So what I want to do is I want to start very broad, and then what I want to do is, by way of the web or other tools, I want to begin to have some differentiation processes that I can begin to segment. This might be webinars, this might be ebooks, this might be any number of different tools. It may be merely phone calls that you're making to them, sharing with them information. But what you're doing is you're kind of calling this list down. The reason we have a difficult time closing deals at full value is because salespeople are afraid this is the only deal they have. So one of the other pieces I love to talk about is the way you maximize your top line revenue is by having the confidence of having a full pipeline. Because when you have a full pipeline, it is amazing how much more confident you are when that customer throws up the price objection or any one of those other typical that freaks people out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because whenever you have that scarcity mentality, rather instead of a abundance mentality, you really just change the way you operate. And of course, that's with your confidence. And I know even with myself, when I started doing consulting early on, I was I was much more likely to compromise on my price, and I wasn't as sure of myself, also because it was early on, but because I didn't have as many deals lined up. Whereas later on, now that I have a really full pipeline and probably too much to handle, that I actually have to say no to people quite regularly, my mentality is totally different, and I wouldn't even think about discounting.
Right. We get scared when it's the only deal. Oh no, if I don't get this, I'm not going to survive. I'm not going to live.
Yeah.
Hey, panic mode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So, in terms of once you have these ideal customers, how do you cultivate really strong customer relationships to fight churn? Is that part of that your online presence, or is that more of an offline relationship building?
Well, I never want to stop the online presence, because that is as much marketing, as it is. But I'm going to do a couple things. I always believe in a four-legged relationship. One of the problems that a lot of times we have in sales companies is we become so streamlined, so focused, so we try to be so cost effective. And I want to have two people engaged with every account. The reason being is because it is amazing the different insights, the different questions, the different ideas that different people are going to have as you have a second person dealing with that company. At the same time, I want to make sure that my relationship with you as a company, as a customer, is not just with one person. Mm-hmm. My ideal level of relationship is when I have it going 2 levels above my typical buyer. In other words, if I'm dealing with you and you're at X level, I want to, over a period of time, develop a relationship that goes 2 levels above. Why? Because when I go 2 levels above, I'm going to begin to learn the strategic insights that you are doing as a company, which my buyer is, or the person who's normally buying from me isn't necessarily going to have. How do I stay embedded with you? When I know your strategic insights, I have the best position to help me help you long term.
That makes a lot of sense. That's a really good point. And I think it also probably helps that if you're on the other side, if you're not just one person, when that person leaves the company, you're less likely to lose the relationship with the company.
Yep, the old somebody got hit by a bus. Yep, and it happens. It happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and there's huge turnover with sales teams these days, so that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so my next question are, how can you really prepare salespeople to win? That's something you talk about a lot.
Oh, yeah. How do you prepare salespeople? Preparing to win is so much of a mental outlook. You know, what is very interesting is if you look at a typical sports team, and I don't care if it's the NFL, the NBA, whatever, surprisingly enough, the talent set, yes, there's difference in the players, but it isn't how on any one given day, one team, which may have less talent supposedly, beats the other team. And what it comes down to is it's so much of a mental game. There are two things that have to exist within the mindset of every salesperson: a level of confidence and a level of competence. Now, what do I mean by this? Confidence is all about my sales process. I believe in my prospecting process. I believe in how I'm moving customers through the pipeline. My competence is in the knowledge of what it is that I'm selling. Now, this sometimes freaks out new salespeople. I say, don't get freaked out, because the way you supplant competence is by having better questions. And what I find is this: good salespeople, great salespeople, are very comfortable asking customers questions that the customer doesn't have the answer to, and they don't have the answer.
Mark.
Now, if you think about that for a moment, only a confident salesperson is going to ask those types of questions. So one of the things I'll say is get confident first, and the competence will come. And what happens is pipeline. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat part of that? It broke up in the middle. I know what
Sure.
you were saying, but so right after the part about asking the right questions and how
Yes.
to supplant it got kind of choppy in the middle.
That's okay. Yes. What I want you to do is I want you asking good questions. And great salespeople are very comfortable asking questions that the customer doesn't have the answer to, and they don't have the answer to. Now, if you think about this for a moment, the only type of salesperson that's going to ask that type of question is a confident salesperson. So what I'll say is this: I develop my confidence first by my sales process, and it naturally flows into my competence, the knowledge of what it is that I'm selling, and I'm going to be developing that by way of the questions I'm asking.
That makes a lot of sense. I think I recently had an interview with Mark Robert from HubSpot, and he was telling me, I think it was Mark Robert, he was telling me that one of the things that salespeople or companies should invest in with sales early on is actually basically hiring journalist type people to find out the right questions with the customers and do that discovery with customers and prospects to help salespeople ask the right kind of questions.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Now, let me run with that one step further.
Yeah.
Here's something I tell salespeople all the time. The best questions are short questions. The reason being, short questions get you long answers. Mm-hmm. Long questions get you short answers. Now, think about this for a moment. Too many times salespeople love to, I want to show you how brilliant I am. So if I sit there and I get talking, and then I go, oh, wait a minute, I'm supposed to ask a question. So in the middle of this diatribe, I throw out a question. And I get done, and you, the customer, look at me and you go, what was it you were, duh, they don't know. So what I like is short questions. Why? How? Could you give me another example? Could you explain that again? And you see what I got, those are very short questions that get the customer talking.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a really good point. So along the same lines of that, what are some ways, and maybe even with questions, that you can create a sense of urgency with the customer?
Yeah, sense of urgency really comes back to the whole ROI piece we were talking about earlier, or the gain, the risk, because the whole thing is none of this begins to take hold until you buy from me. Now, the easiest way to put urgency is, well, gee, I got to have this order by the 15th of the month, or I got to have the order by the 20th, of the month in order to get it. And I hate to say it, but liar, pants on fire. Because what happens if the customer calls up 2 days later and wants to order? You're probably going to give it to them.
Yeah.
So you somewhat destroy your credibility. So I put it back on the customer and say, hey, look, the reason we need to buy, The reason we need to get this going now is so that you can really reap the benefit of the reward of why you're doing business with me.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're putting it kind of as the opportunity cost for them of not getting
Right.
started.
The opportunity cost coming back. Now, if you do have a short, if you do have a critical timeline, I get that. Limited supply, something of that nature. That's fine. Go ahead and leverage it. But too many times I see salespeople throwing out fake, artificial deadlines that mean nothing.
That makes a lot of sense. It also definitely appeals to the economist in me, so I like it. So my next question is, what are some key skills, and we talked about competence and confidence before, but other key skills that salespeople should develop, and how can they work on them?
One of the biggest skills that I think people have to have is the ability to be able to process information rapidly in a logical, sequential manner. Here's one of the problems. Salespeople love to chase the shiny object. They suddenly get this lead. Ooh, wow, they think it's the greatest thing in the world. And they wind up going down the rabbit trail. And it takes them nowhere. So what I'll argue is this. No. I want to have logical processing skills that are developed by way of listening and reasoning. And you say, how do you teach those? Well, you know what? I've never really found a great way to teach them other than by getting them out and getting them to experience the sales process.
And so when they're out experiencing the sales process, maybe what are some things that they should be thinking about or looking for as they're going through that to be more self-aware and conscientious, not just going through the motions?
Yeah. There's a couple questions that they need to ask themselves every sales call. And this is whether it's in person, whether it be on the phone, whatever. What did I learn about the customer? What did I learn? Is there something new that I learned about the customer that is going to help me identify a critical need that they have? B, what did I teach them? What did I teach them that is going to help them be better in what it is that they do? And then the final piece is, what did I sell them? What did I sell? I call it the LTS. And if I go through this process, and I do this after every call, it is amazing how I go through this self-learning. Then at the end of the day, you want to ask yourself these two questions. What was the most critical piece of information I learned today? And how am I going to use it tomorrow? So think about that. If I'm a new salesperson, I ask myself that question, those two questions. What was the most critical piece of information I learned today? And how am I going to use it tomorrow? Wow, you know what happens? You get into this self-teaching, self-development mode. And high-performing salespeople are ones who are continuously developing themselves.
That makes a lot of sense. And I like also that your second part of the two things you should ask every day is very actionable. So you're reflecting, you're gathering that information, and then you're thinking, okay, great, but how can I put it into play? And hopefully probably with a timeline or a deadline.
Right. Yep. That's good.
Cool. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you very much, Mark.
Hey, thank you. And again, you can jump out and visit the website. It's thesaleshunter.com.
Thank you very much. This has been a Sales for Startups and Sales Folk interview with me, Heather Morgan, and Mark Hunter, the Sales Hunter, with the lovely book you can see in the background, High Profit Selling.
Great.
This video has been brought to you by Sales Folk and Sales for Startups. Visit us at salesfolk.com and salesforstartups.org. Thank you.